So next up we want to install Maven. Don't have Maven currently. Maven is one of the tools used as part of your build process. It makes it easy when you're using Java to set up a standard project layout, and then you can compile, run your tests, download all dependencies very easily. So it's the easiest way of installing Selenium as part of your development process. So it can be a bit hard to get used to if you haven't used it before. So you're going to have to look through some of the Maven documentation, get your head around it. If you look on the Selenium site, if you look on download, then you'll see that Maven is supported, and you just add the dependency in as part of your POM. If that doesn't make any sense, that's just because you haven't used Maven before. That's fine. When you start to use it, you will learn. So, what we want to do is install Maven. So I'm going to follow the instructions on the main site. There we go. So pretty much it's just following the instructions that are listed here. So I'm going to install Maven 3.0.4. So let's get hold of the download. Let's save that. And then let's find the instructions for what we have to do. So here we go. We scroll down the page, we find the installation instructions. So we have a download. Let me extract everything in the download. Great. Close that. Now, what else do we have to do? Since the instructions assume that we chose this directory, let's choose that directory. So I'm going to create a new folder to stick all this in. Apache Software Foundation. There we go. That's the top level. So let's put that in there. So now we have program files, Apache Software Foundation, Apache Maven 3.0.4. Correct. That's what we have. Now we need to add some environment variables. And that's why we downloaded RapidEE, because adding environment variables can be a complete pain under Windows, or I find that. So let's see what we have to do. Add an M2 environment variable. In the user variables. Fine, let's do that. User variables. Add a variable called M2. It's a string. It's a directory. It is C program files, Apache Software Foundation, Apache Maven. Now, add the M2 environment variable in the user variables with the value. There we go. So this is where the entire setup started going pear-shaped for me. So I'm going to start editing the video to match this. So while I did follow all the instructions, I did add an M2 variable, I did do all the rest of it. What I discovered on Windows 7 was that I did not need the M2 variable because when Windows 7 sees system variables with M2 and M2 home, it doesn't match them up correctly. So I ended up creating an M2 home variable. I ended up putting it in the system variables. You'll see all this later on. I did create a Java home, but I had a whole bunch of problems that I had to sort out. It took me about half an hour to install this on Windows 7 because I'd forgotten how to do it, and I was following the instructions here. So the video will now jump to the end point that we got to after me installing it. Okay, so I had some issues with this. I found that if I did actually use the M2 properties variable as it is here, the M2 home never expanded. So what I ended up adding into my properties were an M2 home in the user variables, which points to the home for Maven, and in the path an M2 home bin. And if you see here, I'm pretty much following the instructions that are given on the Maven site. What I've had to do is move the M2 home environment, not in the user variables, but in the system variables. And now you can see that it's found Maven. We haven't set Java home yet. So now if I set Java home, and I'm going to add that in the system variables as well. Now I think the reason the M2 and the M2 home didn't work is that M2 was coming before M2 home, so it wasn't finding M2 home and expanding it. So I've kept it simple and just kept to the M2 home. So let's add the Java to our JDK. Now save that. New command prompt to pick up the, and Maven is running. So if I do a, now I couldn't find anything in there, which is fine. Maven minus version. So we have Maven 3.04. So from these instructions, what I had to do was putting everything in system variables, not creating an M2, in the path adding the M2 home and the /bin. Then Maven is working. Now your mileage may vary depending on your operating system and what Windows decides to do next and what permissions you've got. But that's what I've had to do to get Maven set up here. And that's Maven done. Easy.